So you've done your GM onboarding and you want to get going with your first game template. I'm here to show you not exactly how to do that, but to do it well, or how to think about it. It's much more important that you're thinking about this the proper way, or at least intentionally, rather than just throwing up a game. Unfortunately, if you throw up a game that's very generalist or very average or very kind of blah or gray, it's not going to get any traffic. So that means that you have to think about what you're doing, not just throw it up there and just hope people sign up. Very rarely works. So I'd like to go through my process of how I think about things, and then also give you some tips. If you have not attended the GM onboarding through Start Playing Games, you're going to want to do that first. However, you can pause the video and come back, and then, if you just want to watch it twice, that's cool too. Number one on the list of things to consider is the time slot. It is the number one factor of whether or not someone's going to sign up for your game. People search by time slot in order to determine which games are available when they're available. Most people work on schedules, or they have jobs or whatever, or they just don't like playing in the morning, they'd rather play in the evening. That's generally how it works. So you're going to want to keep in mind that a majority of your players are going to be in that evening time slot, whatever day of the week it might be. And that is evening American time. So somewhere in North America, you kind of have that window from, 4 to 9 p.m. Pacific. That's when a majority of the games are going to take place, because that's where a majority of the players are going to be, in the evening time games. So weekends also are very popular to consider. So you need to also keep that in mind. You're going to probably want to start on weekends, if any, because there's just more clients to choose from. Instant Book is a no-brainer. You have to do Instant Book. As of the time of this recording, Instant Book increases your buy-through rate by 30%. 30%. If you could get that anywhere else in the marketing world, you would just be the CMO or whatever those titles are. You can tell I'm not an exec, I'm just a small business owner. But anyway, so for ongoing campaigns, it's still important to have a session 0 for that human interaction with the player that's joining. So after you've put your game up, you need to make sure that you have that window of time beforehand where you are available and you can sit down with your player in order to have that session 0, because they're going to be joining a party. And if you just throw a random player in there with no introduction or no anything, they have to get set up. Most likely they have to test their equipment. You have to talk to them about what their character is going to be. You have to help them create a character a lot of the time. You have to tell them what's going on in the campaign right now. All of these things really require that you have that session 0. So I do mine an hour prior to when we actually have the game itself happen. And I have them submit to me their safety and consent checklist, everything that they do with their character after I've laid out in my Discord everything to do with their character, what the rules are for creation. So make sure that you set a time that works for you and also the clients. And don't be afraid to shift the time. So if you are posting a particular game in a time slot, you need to make sure that you're able to wiggle left and right an hour or so if you can. And when you get only 1 or 2 players, you need to be upfront with them and say, hey, if this isn't working and we're not running the game after, let's say, a week or 2 or 2 weeks, and we don't have any new players, and you have that minimum player amount, then you need to tell them that and say, hey, can we move this forward an hour? Can we move this back an hour? Maybe that'll work. And then to try different stuff. Next up, we're going to take a look at some thumbnails and how important they are, and we're going to discuss how they work with the titles. So this will be thumbnails and titles, since they really cannot be separated. They work together, and if you're not having them work together, then you're really just shooting yourself in the foot. And I don't recommend anybody do that. So we're going to take a look at what works, what doesn't work. And I'm speaking in general terms because every game, every brand is going to be different. Your brand and whatever it is that you're doing is going to be different than what I do. And that's good. But I'm just going to give you some general rules about what my opinion is. and we can go from there. If you want to argue with me in the comments, you can. So in general, when you're scrolling on any sort of digital marketplace, you're going to be looking for something that catches your eye more than anything else. And if you are not producing some sort of eye-catching effect, creating that buying action with creating that interest with someone like looking directly at you, or creating something that's very interesting, then you're not going to get someone to stop scrolling. Because the average person is either going to be on their phone and they're going to be doing this, they're going to be swiping, or they're going to be just doing this, and they're scrolling and they're looking for something that jumps out at them. Very rarely are you going to meet someone that has been trained by YouTube and Amazon and they don't scroll quickly. So as we're looking at these different thumbnails, we want to keep a few different things in mind. The scrolling is going to be quickly for the users because of how they're trained through Amazon and YouTube, and they're not going to slow down unless they see something that catches their eye. So a few things to keep in mind is that landscapes generally do pretty terribly. That doesn't mean that they can't be successful. That just means that you're going to have a much more difficult time in order to get someone to stop on any sort of advertisement that you have if it's not clear what the advertisement is. And you're going to hear me say that a lot because it means so much to the success of someone actually buying your service. You have to be very clear about everything that you are doing with your product. It has to be very apparent what niche you're in, what game you're playing, and what type of game, what tone, what theme, what type of DM you are. All of that is super important, and we need to make sure that that's represented in the thumbnail first. So if you have, for instance, a thumbnail that is just a landscape, people are going to scroll past it. They're gonna. I'm sorry. You're not conveying what is special about your game. People do not care about landscapes. They care about people. They care about things. They care about events. They care about things that are happening that they can imagine themselves doing as their character. So the further you get away from people, the more difficult it is going to be for someone to make that decision for the buying action. So keep that in mind. You don't want to put a ton of stuff in your thumbnail. You want to put enough stuff to accurately represent what the game is. A couple of different technical things that I'll mention as well. Do not use GIFs. GIFs do not load on mobile very quickly, so I don't recommend them. Do they work for some people? Sure. However, with SPG, they do advertise outside of their marketplace on Facebook and other places. And if you have a GIF, they do not use your game in order to advertise, meaning that you're not getting that free advertisement. So I recommend against it. Also, on mobile, doesn't load very quickly, so they're just going to scroll right past it. So you're just decreasing the amount of clients that will be interested in see your thumbnail and give it a chance, okay? All of the decisions that you make are pretty much starting with the thumbnail. You need to acquire, either from SPG's free resources, the thumbnail base art that is, what do you call that? That license-free art that you can use. Or you can hire a graphic designer, or you can pay an artist for something that they've done. Just make sure that you find something that fits the aesthetic of what the game is before you commit to it. Once you get your title in there, your title is going to match up with your thumbnail, and then it's going to create a complete picture. Meaning, you do not want your thumbnail to have both the title in the same place as the place for the title. That's redundant. It's not going to be helpful to you. It does nothing for you. It doesn't create opportunities for you. I will say for most titles, if you're running an official adventure, you'll want to put that in the title, because that is a lot of advertising that Wizards of the Coast has already done for you, or whichever game system that you're talking about. They've already done that advertising for you. On average, it takes 6 to 8 impressions meaning someone has to see what something is 6 to 8 times in order to determine whether or not they want to buy it. So the more obscure you go with your system or anything like that, the more difficult it is to create a buying action in someone who's not tried out a system before, because they're taking a chance. And people aren't just going to take a chance unless they clearly know what it is. So all of this advice is doubly important for anybody that is running a non-D&D game, because you're not supported by the D&D advertising that has already permeated everybody's brains and convinced them that they want to play D&D, okay? So if you're running an Alien game, you're running a Call of Cthulhu game, it better be very clear in that thumbnail what type of game that is, and also in the title, you need to be very descriptive, or as descriptive as possible without taking up too much room. I tend to like titles that have 2 or 3 things, which accurately represent what's in the game. What the game is, what the tone is, what level they are if you're playing D&D, and other things like if you like your table to be more inclusive, which I hope everybody does. But I'm a queer. I have over 50% of my players are queer, and that's because of the way I represent myself, okay? And that's going to be how you get the clients that are going to stick around as well, because people like to play with who they're like. So that's another thing to consider. The last thing you need to consider really is price. Price is not going to vary too much amongst the highest levels of, for instance, SPG. And with inflation, things are going up, but all of the people at kind of the top recommended list are pretty much in the same ballpark. And if you're just starting out, you want to probably start at around minimum wage, maybe higher, whatever that might be for your area, and then sort of gauge what that is. I think average right now, as of time of recording, is like $18 or something like that. I'm quite a bit higher, but I'm fucking worth it. And also, you know, there's other GMs on the site who are much more expensive than me, which is okay too. You just need to figure out how much you're working in order to justify your hourly rate. So if you're prepping for 1 hour and you're running the game for 3, that's 4 hours of work total, right? And then you have a little bit of customer service, maybe half an hour or like an hour every week. That's 5 hours of work. And then you need to divide what your average table size is going to be by the number of players and when you run it. So if I have a minimum of 3 players, that means my price needs to be at the minimum amount that I'm willing to make to run a game for 3 players. That doesn't mean that one of them is like a seat filler or something like that, because I'm worried about making enough money to survive or making enough money to make it worth this part-time income that you're trying to earn. So that's been the introduction to figure out how to position yourself with your games and marketing your campaigns on SPG. It's going to be quite a bit different if you're reaching out to other people individually and one-to-one sales. That's a little more difficult. But in general, SPG is going to provide you with most things that you're going to need in order to be successful as far as their marketplace. It takes a little bit of time. You need to do it one table at a time, for most people. And you just need to be patient. If something isn't working, if you try something, you're not married to that method. You need to try something else with either your description, your ad copy, your thumbnail, the game you're running. You need to try different stuff. Don't just bang your head against the wall and think that just because you post one game, it's going to fill up. It's probably not. It's probably not. Especially if you're new and you don't have a clientele base built. So you need to keep working at it. Okay? Well, thanks for showing up. I really appreciate you. And it super helps if you hit the like button. And then also check back the other videos. Or check back when I do the other videos. Ugh. Have I been talking for that long? Oh my gosh. Snappy outro.